Well, Parliament will once more request the Constitutional Court for a further delay to amend the Electoral Act. Since January, Parliament has been discussing amending the law to let independent candidates run in provincial and national elections. However, Mandisa Mashego, who is with the New Nation movement, argues that Parliament should take amending the Electoral Act seriously in order to ensure better accountability mechanisms than what we are currently seeing unfold around the Phala Phala report. She joins me now in studio to discuss this further. Well, I think, Mandisa, thank you so much for joining us, of course. But let's start with your reaction to Parliament seeking another extension of this deadline, approaching the Constitutional Court for some more time.
Well, I'd like to add to that and say that you must add to the circus all the time, because all it is really a circus, and we repeatedly state that. And they prove it in their actions. The National Council of Provinces, whose job is really just to go to the ground, basically, and make sure that every citizen is engaged, and we all know that doesn't happen. They've now stated that they are also going to submit their own bill. Amendment bill. Now, you must look at this in the context of you as a South African citizen and me as a South African citizen, especially the native citizens, because I distinguish between native citizens and settler citizens, but we are both citizens covered by the Constitution. Our rights are completely trampled throughout the entire process because neither the minister who submitted the sham of a bill, right, nor the NCOP are actually submitting a bill that the people want, right? Because there's no proper consultation. We've discussed that, the sham of the consultations that were held last year early. And the reason they held those consultations last year early was because we threatened towards the end of the previous year to take them back to the Constitutional Court, right? And so there is no honesty. And they're going to perpetually, we'll be sitting here 5 years from now with you asking me the same question. Asking me the same question about how we feel for yet another request for another postponement. That's what they're going to perpetually do. They don't want change.
What does this mean for 2024? I think that's a worrying concern for a lot of South Africans.
Look, so us as South Africans, we don't get involved in lawmaking, which is the first problem, which is why New Nation movement went to the Constitutional Court, actually to the Western Cape High Court, initially in 2014 and then again in 2019, then we escalated the matter, is because you don't make laws. The laws that govern you, for instance, if you get married, a lot of people get married, right? And then when they get divorced, they get surprised about things that are in the Marriages Act. Because they don't know, like, you send your children to school, you don't know the Schools Act. You're a parent, you don't know what's in the Parents Act. You know why? Because the laws come from Europe and America in a briefcase full of money to lobby MPs, and then they pass the bill. So South Africans don't know what the voting environment is supposed to be like. And so even the crisis that we are in now, or not us actually, because we need to distinguish ourselves from the political parties, because political parties are exactly like corporations, right? In fact, them and the corporations are in a neo-colonial imperialist relationship because they feed each other, and this one does. And so if you look at the saga that's happening now with Cyril Ramaphosa and his the criminal brigade that he's leading in the ANC, it is precisely because of what we have been saying as the New Nation movement, that you need to vote for Ntokozo as an individual. You need to vote for Mandisa as an individual, not for Mandisa under Mandisa Pty Limited political party, because it has a legal, even a financial implication. The budgets that are passed in Parliament or Council or legislatures, they are not passed with your permission. They are not even passed with your understanding of how that budget works. A little bit maybe on the local government level, there's the IDP process. That process, to some extent, also it's very weak, but to some extent it tries to address the issue of consulting you before passing a budget. And why I'm raising that, it's very important for you to be able to pass a budget as a person, as a citizen, versus a representative in Parliament. The second thing is that people argue that our argument is flawed because there's no difference between proportional representation, 100% used as it is in South Africa, and the party list process, which goes along with the 100% dependency on proportional representation, and what we are proposing. Utter nonsense. The Constitutional Court agreed with us. The Constitutional Court was very clear that the freedom of association and all majority freedoms are actually trampled by the current bill.
System, right.
The reason you have the problem now in the ANC or rather in the country, where people are creating panic because there's a legitimacy problem now with Cyril Ramaphosa, which, by the way, is not being properly investigated, still needs to be investigated, and that's why his review is going to be entertained, right? But the reason you have this crisis is because you voted for the ANC on the ballot paper. You did not vote for Cyril Ramaphosa, even if his face was there. Therefore, you have no right to, one, hold him directly accountable, two, to replace him with anybody else.
Right. With everything happening with the NCOP and this potential extension, because the court still has to grant it or decline, we knew that the constituency-based system wasn't entirely off the table. Is this an opportunity for that to be something to be reconsidered, something to be brought back onto the table, this extension?
That's what we want. We called for, and I think also
because that was the majority of the pushback when the bill was actually first brought forward to Parliament, civil society decrying this voting threshold and the unjustness of it all. Very unjust, and also basically a slap in the face of the Constitutional Court judgment of Justice Madlanga of 11 June 2020. We asked for them to align with the Van Zyl-Slabbert report, which we are aware of, to say that the 400 seats or however many seats in whether Parliament, legislature, wherever, there should be a 75-25% split. 25% must be given to proportional representation, and by virtue of interpretation, the political party's current way of the party list process to satisfy them, right? And then 75% must go to individuals who are elected directly. Right? And that's the first thing that they trashed. They trashed that by calling for 50-50, right? But in the first 50%, they are suggesting that in that 50%, it must be both the proportional representation, as you know it now, the party list, and the independent candidates, which essentially, they are now turning it around and saying it must be 75% proportional representation, which is the crisis that you have now, and 25%. I want to give you a direct linkage as to why very quickly, Mandisa,
as to why not having an individual account to is a problem. The corruption that you see happening now, there's very little you can do about it if the Hawks decide not to investigate somebody. You'll read about allegations and you'll see the money disappearing, you'll see the service delivery not happening, you'll see 80% of the municipalities being dysfunctional and all the provinces basically being dysfunctional, and there's nothing you can do about it. But if Cyril did not come as Cyril Ramaphosa under the party list, you could actually have him jailed, and you even could impeach him much quicker than you can now.
Than what we're seeing right now. Mandisa, thank you so much for coming onto our program and helping us to make sense of this new development. That was Mandisa Mashego from the New Nation Movement.